some love for sale.
Welcome back, everyone, to the 1% in Health. Today we have Mark Seneca. He is a childhood friend of my family. I'm very excited to have him on today. He is a renowned lawyer in the U.S., top 500 in the U.S. He's a devout family man. I'm super excited to first talk about how we met. But before we start, I'd like to remind everybody that there are triggers in these conversations, and we are not professionals to seek professional help for conditions that we discuss. So with that, welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining.
Welcome.
Yep, welcome.
Thank you all. Pleased to be here.
So 1981, my mom drives 4 little cowboys from central Utah to Reston, Virginia. And we go into the church building, and there's this awesome family, the Senecas. They adopt us. It's really cool because we're little cowboys, and they're Native Americans, the Senecas. And so we had the Cowboys and Indians back in the days. And Mark, are you a Redskin fan?
Oh yeah, back when they were winning Super Bowls.
Yeah, and the Commanders, back in the Commanders. So I'm totally being not politically correct with all my conversation now, but it's now the Commanders. But you were a Commander fan, right?
For sure.
And we were Cowboys fans. Anyway, so they would invite us to Christmas dinners. They took care of us. They taught us. Mark was a little bit older than myself and older than just my older brother. But Mark was. Did you play football too, or just basketball?
I played football up until my sophomore year when I decided that basketball was my best chance at college sports, and started doing that year round.
Yeah, and Mark crushed it. One of the top basketball players in the 80s for South Lakes High School. Played on an awesome team. We looked up to him for athletics. Their family is very well educated. We'll get into that in a little bit. But we had a lot of fun at Christmas times. They fed us. They had nice dinners. Always had presents. They adopted us, like I said, and it was amazing growing up next door in the same neighborhood as the Senecas. So let's talk about that a little bit, Mark, with your family, your upbringing. If you don't mind, kind of talk about your parents and siblings and Reston, Virginia a little bit, and kind of let's get into that.
Yeah, I think a big part of my story is the story of my father and my mother. My father is a full-blood Seneca, was born and raised on the Seneca Reservation, the Cattaraugus Reservation, the Seneca Nation of Indians in Western New York. He was, from a poor family, had 2 sisters, had a mom who was very strong, and a father who also was very strong and accomplished in terms of that period of time. But they were on the reservation and had limited economic opportunities in that situation. And he had a lot of siblings and extended family that really never found their way off the reservation. For whatever reason, my grandmother and the people around him, planted in his mind something much bigger than that. And I think he pursued life without even realizing he really didn't have any standing to dream and think as big as he did. I tell a lot of people when I talk about my dad that, he may be one of those circumstances where his siblings do not out-achieve the former generation. My dad, like I said, he got off the reservation primarily through athletics. He was a state champion wrestler, went to BYU and both wrestled and played football. The nexus with the LDS Church was, there was a small branch that was established on the outskirts of the reservation when my dad was about 8 or 9 years old. And my grandmother liked the clean-cut nature missionaries, liked the fact that it created some structure, and ultimately moved her family down the path of joining the church and had structure in their lives. And I said, BYU and the affiliation with the church and my dad's athletic allowed him to get off the reservation and pursue college. That's where he met my mom, who has a longer history and European ancestry and kind of an LDS genealogy, and they ultimately got married and started having kids. I'm the second oldest in my family. By the time I was 2 or 3 years old, my dad was off to Harvard to go to law school, and would take us to Cambridge and Harvard Yard and let us chase the. Most people took their dogs, but my dad took us as his kids to chase the squirrels in the park. He went on to be a White House Fellow, very exclusive program established by the presidential network in Washington D.C. Applied and spent a year as a White House Fellow, and then that led to taking a job in government, and ultimately spent a successful career in various government agencies, Department of Energy, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and started his own private practice representing Native American tribes around the country, primarily in sovereignty and other Native issues. And he has since come full circle and retired back to the reservation, where he's enjoying what he calls the autumn years of his life. Will be 81 this year, and still swings a golf club fairly well.
And I was able to go up. Yeah, I was able to go up to the reservation one year where Tom, your brother, shot me with a BB gun. Actually, so it was a little bit payback. So it was awesome to go up. Do I have this wrong that he was one of the first to get a Harvard law degree from that area, being Native American? Do I have that right, or?
Well, I think he's among a handful of Native Americans to be educated at Harvard, nationwide.
Yeah,
right.
But again, it's a level of accomplishment from where he started and where he thought he could go and what he actually accomplished. It is amazing, and the way that it benefited myself and my siblings is. He created a standard of excellence and demanded a standard from us that allowed all of us to, be proactive in trying to achieve as we grew up in our formative years and trying to accomplish things as we went through life.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Were you always smart? Did school always come easy to you?
I would say I was probably above average smart. I wouldn't say I was, kind of was off the charts, valedictorian type of stuff. I probably got by with a 3 or 3.6, something like that. Yeah. I tested well, so I was, in terms of standardized testings and being able to get into schools and colleges and things of that nature.
And how about sports? Let's talk about basketball a little bit. Talk about who you played with and some of that, because that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about having any trauma in my life, it was getting injured just before my senior season and having, kind of a big part of my self-identity taken away at the prime. But I grew up playing street ball and, just up the court, a court that is too small for a 5-on-5, but we played 5-on-5 with a number of folks that played pro basketball and certainly high-level college basketball, including, Michael Jackson from South Lakes High School, that was among the Georgetown Hoyas when they were winning champions. Grant Hill, a few years younger than me, but was in that mix, and a lot of others. And I had the opportunity not only in high school, but in AAU sports to play with and against a lot of folks that were more athletic than me. But at the time, I was able to hold my own and play against top quality talent that went on to, impressive college careers and pro careers. Yeah. So that was, right. I would say I was a better basketball skills that I was an athlete, and I stopped growing at about 6'2", and I needed about 6'8" to translate my game.
I was thinking you play. Level. I've always looked up to you. Maybe I thought you were 6'4", 6'5", just to throw.
Well, if my long arms make me play like that.
Okay.
And see, Mark, I'm from the reservation, so I mean, Native Americans in basketball, it's not a game; it's a religion. Everything stops when it comes to basketball. I mean, I know people that will sell their furniture to go to a tournament. Natives don't go on vacation; they go to basketball tournaments.
Yeah, no, I didn't get completely immersed in that, but I did have opportunities through the years to cross paths and play a few games in those native types of leagues, as well as crossing paths when I was still playing in graduate school with some natives that were part of that, including, if you guys are into golf at all, Nota Begay, who was on the golf team with Tiger Woods at the same time that I was in grad school, and was an avid basketball player in addition to his golf skills. So he wouldn't remember it, but I remember playing basketball with Nota in kind of pickup games at Stanford.
That's awesome.
So I have a question. Why did your dad go to Harvard and maybe not like Dartmouth or someplace, which was kind of designed for East Coast Native Americans? Was it just a better college, or? I
don't know what actually led him to that, and whether he cast the net more broadly. I think that Harvard has always had a reputation. There's certainly others, and the positioning changes, but as a reputation as the preeminent institution. And if you had an opportunity, funny story, I got lucky in terms of having run out of money and run out of time when I was applying to grad schools. And I had a list of top tier schools, and I never got to the sure bets. And so I applied to Harvard, and I applied to Stanford, and I applied to University of Chicago. And some of those were applying to both the business school and the law school. And I got into Harvard Law School, and my dad was so proud and thought that was the end all be all, and it was a done deal. I mean, how could you even consider going anywhere else?
Yeah, right.
And I was holding out for Stanford and a few others just because my perception was it was less cutthroat. It was California. It would be a more fun experience, better golf course, better weather. And ultimately, I got into both schools at Stanford, and that's where I went. And all he could do was really scratch his head and shake his head in disgust.
And so the first part of this podcast, we usually talk about community and family upbringing. Let's talk a little bit about the schooling a little bit more. And then we'll get into the career and all the amazing things you've done there. Just incredible. I'm so excited to be doing this podcast with you. And then we'll talk about some health conditions after that. The schooling, you did attend BYU as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to BYU and graduated with a degree in finance.
Okay, and then you went to Stanford?
I took a job at IBM in Connecticut.
Okay.
I got married shortly after I graduated, or before I graduated from undergrad. I took a job with IBM that was more of a fellowship internship, and was applying to grad schools during that kind of 8-month period from December to. And
this is when you ran out of money?
Oh, well, ran out of money in terms of every
applying.
application cost $100, $200, whatever, and time and procrastination, and I never got around to submitting the school that I thought was a sure bet. So I just rolled the dice and shot high, and was very fortunate.
And you were married at this time when you were applying? Okay, awesome. And you get into Harvard and to Yale. Stanford. You get both a law degree and an MBA at Stanford. Do I have that?
Yeah, right? A lot of the schools have joint programs. Law school is typically 3 years. Business school on its own is 2. You can combine the 2 and get both degrees in 4 years verversus 5.
And that's what you did.
That's what I did at Stanford.
That's awesome.
Was it easy? Was it hard? Did you? What was being married and the whole, going to school, and how was that?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I think a little bit for me was, I would characterize myself and my accomplishments and kind of my psyche as being, on the one hand, extremely confident and on the other hand, having an equal or greater degree of self-doubt. And, I sort of viewed getting into Stanford, which, has very low statistics, as the accomplishment, and, kind of felt like, did I belong? How much of it was a function of, diversity in my Native American background as opposed to, my inherent capabilities. And, through the process, some of the self-doubt crept in, and I did fine. I wouldn't say that, I was in a group of probably 10 joint degree candidates. One of them is the chief judge in the DC appellate courts.
Wow.
And was on the short list a few years ago to be nominated to the Supreme Court. So the caliber of colleagues that I interacted with, and it's the same story for those folks. And I've always felt like a little bit, am I in that league, and where do I go with my career? If you hear me talk about how I became a lawyer, you would learn that it is a sequence of next logical steps as opposed to a burning desire to be a lawyer from the outset. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I've been practicing now, this is my 28th year. I couldn't tell you that I really, I was an apologetic lawyer up until about 5 years ago.
You talked a little bit about confidence, and how much is confidence grinding abilities, like in your opinion? Did you have 5 hours of homework? Did you have to grind it out? Did it come easy? Like, how hard was that?
I would say that I think the start of manifestation of some combination of anxiety and depression that I never had a label for, and my parents even more so didn't label. If I look back at some of the struggles, even in the high school days, it was starting to manifest. I think generally, when I say I haven't lived a traumatic life, I've experienced a lot of success along the way, and didn't have a level of struggle in trying to achieve success athletically or musically or in academics, those types of things. So it wasn't that type of challenge. It was more the depression and the anxious mind and the self-doubt really becoming debilitating at certain stages of my life.
Right. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking, when do we get into it? And I wanted to get into your career maybe before this, but since you brought it up, and I'm glad you did, because you mentioned high school, you mentioned college, you mentioned getting married young, you mentioned getting into the top colleges in the nation, universities in the nation, and with anxiety and depression. And, as I suffer with bipolar, I've had bouts of depression. Mine's more on the manic side, but we talked a little bit about this, but I'm kind of floored when I'm in a depressive state. I can't find enough energy to get out of bed and grind and do things, especially at the level you were doing it at. So let's dive into that a little bit, and then we'll get into the career later. When you say anxious mind, is there at all any attention deficit disorder, anything going on like that, or is it just purely anxiety and a lower level of energy, depression? If you mind describing what that means.
Yeah, to me, it wasn't until a few years into my professional career, and being in a profession that is a bit of a pressure cooker. Mm-hmm. Not only in terms of client demands to progress, kind of a 24/7 mentality, based on churning out hours and getting things right in terms of the stakes that are so it's a difficult profession, and I've always wondered whether the job was making me sick or independently my nature, regardless of what profession I pursued, would manifest in the same way. I started to finally put the label anxiety to part of the ailment, so to speak, even though it took me a while to get my head around that term, because I never thought myself as, a particularly nervous person or fearful person. In fact, I was valued by my colleagues professionally for my stoicism, for my calmness under pressure, to be able to navigate in chaos. But what I realized is that for me, the anxious mind was anticipating something that was either uncertain or painful, to the point that your mind never has a chance to turn off and give your body and your mind a chance to rehabilitate. And so over a period of time, the anxious mind leads into depression because it keeps you in a constant state of energy deficiency, that then there's something that trips you over the edge, and you go from enduring life and being nearly 100% functional, even though it feels like a painful existence, but functional, to not being able to function at all. I would describe my willpower as pretty strong. In a 28 year career, I've only called timeout twice and taken 2 leaves of absence. One was about a 3-month period of time. Okay. And then more recently, and it's now been 7 or 8 years ago, in 2014, I hit a point where I said, I don't want to live this way anymore. And so I've got to take whatever time it takes for me to figure out how to solve this problem and get past it, because what in my mind, even without trauma, what the anxious mind and depression does to you is it deprives you of any sense of contentment. It's a state of mind, even if you're functioning, even if you're not homeless and you're not relying on drugs or addiction, you are enduring life and robbing yourself of what I think the point of life is for us to derive contentment in the journey. And simply enduring life and asking yourself every once in a while, remind me again, what is the point of all of this? Yeah. Make some money and put it in the bank and go into the next day and keep doing it until you die. I always think I've never been suicidal, but many times I've thought, if I stepped off the curb and a bus hit me, I'd kind of be okay with that. Yeah. I mean, that's the state of mind where something is wrong, because without, in the absence of trauma, in the absence of real hardship, in a situation like mine, where I've had plenty of personal success to fall back on, I've got a supportive family, I've got a supportive wife, and yet this the mind was destroying me. It was taking all of the fun out of life. It was taking contentment, and there were periods of time even before I would call it quits. And I heard Nash referred to this on one of your podcasts that I had a chance to listen to, is that you're in survival mode. There were periods of time where, I couldn't drop the ball. I couldn't extricate myself, but I was in survival mode, to the point where I couldn't figure out how to feed myself for lunch. That level of, all I could do was the basics to keep the balls in the air. And my wife would drive and bring me lunch. Yeah. Just to get through the workday.
It's okay.
Yeah, and so in the depressed mind, and the anxious mind that is the precursor to that, in the throes of it, you can't see your way clear of it, and that's why people get to the point of saying, the only relief from the pain is for me to end my life. And it's a real ailment that it is hard for the sufferer to understand, let alone people that are around them that haven't experienced it.
Yeah, Mark, you need your own podcast every week. I've been using GPT and Copy.ai for the last few weeks. Finished my book with it. I've been writing about bipolar, and I feel like I just asked you a question, and you distilled the information as AI does. What is depression? Ask Mark, and you get back the perfect answer. Like what you just described in such a short period of time, with a vast, with 20, 30 years, 40 years of dealing with it and to distill it. I know your brain distills tons of information and has to get it written down, and you're very well versed at that. But that was impressive, and I'm glad you shared your emotions. I didn't know how much you would open up about this. You're in a high level position. You've conquered so much in life, and for you to be vulnerable and open about this is what this show is about. It's truly inspiring. It's gonna be a light to many, and a lot of people at your level, you know, Silicon Valley, top 500 lawyer in the U.S. You know, it's inspiring. So
just to piggyback on you, Sabe, when Mark, when you were talking about anxiety and how it's kind of the inability to come back down off of an overwhelm, like your body gets overwhelmed and you just can't come back on that. I literally was studying that this week, and it was like you were like a textbook, like word for word, in a very great and applicable way that somebody who might not have that, or somebody who has it and don't know that they're going through that, can understand. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah,
I'm so excited to share this.
Yeah, and the way it translated in my world is, you know, the way anxiety affected me was almost like going to my job requires me to touch the hot stove and burn myself every time. And I didn't want to burn myself again, but I had to. And so I just kept churning on. And what I mean by that is the disconnect in my mind was the physical sensation and perception of energy perceived or energy available relative to a much larger amount of energy required to just get through the day, the task at hand.
Yeah.
And when you have that, it's almost like a fear, a mindset where you're anticipating this mismatch of energy required and energy available, and having to do that day after day. And, you know, different people have different breaking points. I was able to be nearly 100% functional most of the time. I never dropped the ball and did something that caused a problem. I never left responsibilities in the lurch. You know, I just suffered quietly in robbing myself of any sense of contentment.
What kind of hours? What kind of hours were you putting in doing this?
Oh, you know, it's day after day in certain periods of time. It's 10, 15, 18 hours, and time pressure of different deals. And you can do that one deal at a time and it's over. But the whole job is to do as many of those you can over and over. So you get through one, and even though that's my job and what I'm good at and what I'm supposed to be seeking out, I think to myself, boy, that was painful. I never want to do that again. And then you get up the next day and you start the next handful of deals, and you're doing it, you know, time after time. And the mind, the anxiousness is almost like expending 2x or 3x the energy, because you're anticipating and playing it out, and you're never able to shut down to really get quality sleep and to regenerate. And you just keep going and going. And at some point it turns into full-blown depression. And you're like, how do I extricate myself from this? And
did you see doctors, therapists at this time? Or were you just white knuckling it, or what?
No, I you know, fairly early in, you know, kind of realizing that was an ailment. And, you know, as time goes on and you learn about different family members, you see siblings, you see children, you look back into the genealogy of kind of extended family going, you know, in my parents' generation, there is a decent amount of genetics where different mental illnesses have manifest themselves. And so I think that it wasn't until, you know, kind of, you know, early part of my career, I was probably, you know, in my late 20s, that I started to put labels to this. And yeah, I sought out, you know, psychiatrists and therapists and medications, and was trying everything I could, acupuncture and anything that I thought could help.
Aren't you guys amazed at how proactive he was? I mean, it blows my mind. Let's talk a little bit. Can you drop some names? I know you're not a name dropper, but can you drop some names of the deals you were working on? I want to give some context to those listening as you're describing this battle. what you're in the middle of and who you're in the middle of it with? Are you able
Yeah,
to?
Currently I'm the co-head of our M&A and practice private equity group at Oric, which is an international firm that has a major presence in Silicon Valley and elsewhere in the technology space. And I spent most of my career in that specialty doing deals in Silicon Valley with technology companies. I had a chance to meet Mark Zuckerberg before Facebook became what it was, and actually represented Facebook when they were offered to be acquired for $1 billion by Yahoo. I represented Apple when they acquired Siri.
Wow.
I've represented Instagram in their sale to Facebook, and I've sold many companies to the Googles and Alphabet, Facebooks, Salesforce, all of the serial acquirers in the Valley. I've had opportunities to represent smart entrepreneurs and do deals that are exciting. Nest Labs sale to Alphabet was another major deal that I led, and other companies in a lot of interesting, exciting spaces, like Cruise Automation, which is an autonomous vehicle company that was purchased a few years by General Motors. So the opportunities I've had in my career to be in the kind of the epicenter of technology and in the mix with companies and clients and high profile deals has been kind of fantastic. And notwithstanding that, up until about 5 years ago, I couldn't tell you that I really liked my job.
Yeah. And did it give you some energy to be working with these giants? And did it, because you were exerting the energy, did you get something back just because of who you're working with, or it still didn't really matter?
Oh yeah, over years, the level of ailment, ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that every day was, a miserable exercise in perseverance and endurance. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the energy. I enjoyed the challenge of, being a lawyer and putting deals together is really like putting together a puzzle that is not linear, and bringing chaotic pieces mm-hmm. together to architect a deal and to manage all of the constituencies and the like. It's explaining things to folks in a way that they can understand. It's being able to write. It's being able to win the confidence of colleagues and impressive executives. And when I think about all of the things that the job entails, when I'm not suffering from a distorted mindset, I was finally able to realize, I just kind of fell into this career and stayed on this path and have done well despite everything. But if I look at it now, I can say that a lot of what it entails, I actually really enjoy.
Well, and I would say falling into it, you grinded into it, and you have a pedigree starting. You talked about your father, and it's amazing, the trajectory, the grind, the hustle, the ability to get into these type of deals and deal with, would you say you absorb people's energy? I'm thinking of you dealing in chaos with depression, anxiety. Did you deflect? Did you absorb? When you're around high-level people doing high-level things, what was your nature? Because there's the term right now that's thrown around, highly sensitive person. I'm a highly sensitive person. Me being around drama or high energy, I can do well with, and sometimes I can't. It just totally. How would you say you are with high-level people, high-level deals? Do you absorb it all?
I would say that I do like to be in charge. I do like to, be the person that is advising the board of directors and dealing with CEOs and running the show. I would say also that when the pressure falls and you're in between deals and there's a lot of things that, when you're under the gun, you're wishing you had some free time to catch up on. I often find myself, I can't focus at all. I can't do those simple things because I've got so much time, and it's not the adrenaline, pressure cooker. So I think that I do somewhat thrive in a energy filled environment. But I would also say that if I was to characterize myself, even though I feel like I can stand up in front of a crowd and be very articulate, and even, if pressed, put on a little charm and some wit and some humor and all of that, I'm an introvert. I often joke, I don't like people. I don't want to be around people. It takes more energy for me to do all of that. And things that, I can still perform and do well on just exhaust me. And as I've read about, introverts and kind of how our makeup is, it's not that you're incapable of one thing or another. It's just a question of how much energy does it take in order to do certain things. And so it's kind of an odd mix of, again, the juxtaposition of confidence versus fear and self-doubt versus, are you energized by people and by energy versus does that deplete you? And I honestly think that I'm an odd mix of both ends of those spectrums.
Yeah, I was just wondering how you are, because you're very articulate and you can distill information incredibly. I mean, you've cut this podcast significantly, getting through emotion, getting through upbringing, getting through college, getting through career in a record time of 40 minutes. It took us 2 or 3 episodes to do these. So again, you're showing off your skills as you've been trained. It's amazing. Clarissa, your mic is out. There you go.
It's still out.
They're vacuuming.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I have mine on mute. I'm going to point out to our listeners real quick that what Mark has done is he has researched what he is experiencing and he has applied what he has learned. And that's what makes a high performer, is instead of just creating a limitation with some sort of diagnosis or I have this and woe is me, it is, I'm going to research this. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do all that I can. And I just want to point that out, Mark. I give you congrats on that. And that shows as you talk about this that you are very well versed.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I would say that given my transparency in recent years of the struggles, I've had opportunities to be kind of a safe haven for others that are kind of silent sufferers. I also have the opportunity to counsel my kids and my nieces and nephews. There's no shortage of folks in my gene pool, namely my family, that are suffering similar things. And what I try to use my experience is to short circuit the time period in which they have to struggle before they find some sustainable solution. I would say that mental illness or mental ailments and other similar types of challenges, there is no panacea, there is no magic pill. And it takes an incredible amount of prioritization and perseverance to go through the trial and error method to find out what combination of medications, what types of therapies, what types of skills can you adopt that allow you to truncate the time period when you start to dip into a dangerous place of smoothing out those highs and lows and have a greater percentage of your time be in a state of contentment. For me, contentment is not absence of difficulty and challenge. To me, contentment is, you hear athletes talk about the process, enjoy the process. Contentment in life is, I am enjoying getting up and facing the challenges of the day. And I don't feel like I'm in a survival mode and an endurance mode where I just as soon be hit by a bus because I'm not feeling any joy. So to me, it's, the pursuit of happiness or contentment or whatever you want to call it, well-being, to me is being able to enjoy the process of life, that when you accumulate all of the days and all the challenges and all the difficulties that come your way, you're growing and you're engaged and you're facing those challenges head on and becoming a better version of yourself every day. That to me is the holy grail in terms of what we're all trying to do in life, but what you have to do with real intentionality if you suffer from any of these types of ailments.
I have a question for you, Mark. So what would you say, is there a certain spiritual side, you being a native and a Seneca? So like when I was going through trauma and whatever, we go to sweat. So I practice the religion of the LDS religion, going to church, going to the temple, but nightly I go to sweat, and that's just something I do with the men, well, men and women go together, but that's a whole different story. But we go there and just kind of, well, my sister jokes about it. She goes, it's just you men emptying your gossip sacks, and it's whatever it is. But, it's our chance to get together and just, I don't know, unwind. And, it's very spiritual because we go in there and we pray for other people. But is there something that the Seneca people do, or something that, I don't know, if you practice the religion or your family, were they traditionalists, not traditionalists, for people that, have never been to a reservation? That's kind of a big question. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there weren't any specific rituals that that became a normal part of our upbringing. Certainly, we spent time on the reservation. All of us identified with the Native American part of our heritage. I had opportunities to witness the elders, namely my great grandmothers on both sides. They lived into their, on the one hand, 106 years old, and
wow.
I witnessed her speaking the Seneca language with my grandmother, and kind of had that identity, and had spent enough time with that part of the family and that part of the world to really identify. I would say on the spiritual component, I think particularly in the Mormon faith and perhaps in other religions, I think a lot of people get caught up in guilt, and if I would just be more worthy,
right,
I wouldn't have all these problems. And the reason you're suffering is because of moral or behavioral or deficiencies or being the sinner that we all are. To me, that can be a component of someone's well-being, but the reality is that a lot of these ailments are physical as much emotional. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm of the view that within reason, you ought to try everything. There's people that are afraid of pharmaceuticals. There's people that feel like they can just with willpower figure things out. I'm of the view that there's different components that work for different people. I got to the point in 2014 when I called time out on life, and I went into outpatient for a while, and I was doing things with people that I thought were very much more sick than me, but I was going through the process of art therapy or talk therapy, or and ultimately that culminated in I'm willing to do anything. And I went down the path of ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, a little bit of a draconian and severe approach on the theory that I don't want to live this way anymore. And if there's a way to reprogram my brain, let's go for it. Sign me up. I ended up doing 4 or 5 treatments of that, and it's a very odd, kind of existence when you're doing that. And they cut me off at one point in time when I died for a little while on the table. They had to restart my heart, and my family still thinks that I'm brain damaged to this day, or at least one of my siblings accused.
If you're brain damaged, my brain is gone.
But my point is, I was willing to do things that were objectively a little bit severe.
Absolutely.
In trying to find a way to be well, and to be, again, it's sort of part of what I had the dissonance for me was, relative to a lot of people that have really suffered in this world, you have a charmed life and a charmed existence, but I couldn't be happy. I couldn't be content. And there wasn't a divorce, there wasn't a bankruptcy, there wasn't, a drug overdose or a homelessness, or there wasn't those types of traumatic events that would be understandable as to how that can really bring someone down into a state of depression. It was the chronic state of being exhausted all the time and having to pick myself up day after day and perform at a high level that, over time, one, it took the joy out of living, and in its worst case, it made me unable to function.
Well, you're talking to the right group here. Holy cow! Yeah, we meet every other Tuesday for potluck. We all know that feeling. I do. You guys all do. You know, you are not alone. You know, I paint. You know, I finger paint, for gosh sake. Let's be real about it. Come hang out with me, Mark. We'll be fun. You'll enjoy it.
So, Mark, what you talked about, like your last biggest breakdown or time that you needed to take off was in 2014. Since then, what have you done to keep your health, or what have you changed, or what have you found that has worked for you that you now incorporate maybe on a daily basis or on a weekly basis that you do to keep your health up?
For me, the turning, I talk about, 5 years ago. What happened 5 years ago that made you start to enjoy your job? Well, what happened is the anxious mind turned off, by and large. And how did that happen? Kind of dumb luck. Finally, after years and years of trying different things, I got to the right dosage of a medication. They're almost like a light switch, finally allowed that anxious mind that was constantly churning and keeping me in a state of depletion to turn off. And it allowed me for much greater majority of the time to feel energized, to feel, free of the same level of chronic anxiety leading to depression. And it's not completely gone. There's periods of time when it revisits and I have a, here we go again type of moment. But by and large, and who knows if the cause and effect is how I equate in my mind, but it's the only thing that I can put my finger on, because I tried lots of different things up to that point. And it was really the medication that turned the switch on the anxious mind. That, in combination with, over periods of time, learning skills to abate rather than feed into the feelings. When you have a bad day, you start feeling the dark clouds. You start feeling that to start to snowball. I think depressed people, in many respects, that's a familiar state of being, and even though they hate being in it, they also want to stay in it. Yeah. And that, that tendency to succumb to it. What I tell my kids is, and I believe this to be true, having experienced it over and over again, that your mindset, what the depressed or anxious mind is, or your mindset free of mental illness, is everything. And it can change from hour to hour, and certainly day to day, and if not day to day, week to week. And so this notion that I'm going to be depressed indefinitely for the rest of my life, or even for the next week, or even tomorrow, give it a chance to give yourself the room to get a good rest and try another day. And I tell my kids, you may not get through it, but keep your feet moving and put one foot in front of the other. And it's a difficult balance to know when you need to give yourself the room and license to recuperate and be sick for a period of time, versus fighting through it to the point where, if you can distract yourself, a lot of times you can truncate the feeling at the start of the day or whatever part of the day that I can't see how I'm going to get through this next hour versus the entire day. But I put my feet forward and I get in front of the computer and some client calls me, and now my mind has to focus on answering that question. It takes me out of my head. I still feel exhausted at the end of the day. I still feel down, but I got through that day. And I really believe that, the odd thing about the mindset is, when you're in the throes of depression, the reason people off themselves is they can't see any scenario where it's going to lift.
Yeah.
Then you come out of it, and that same depressed person that has lived it looks back at that existence and say, I am never going to feel that way again, and I don't know how that happened in the first place. And so it's this all or nothing type of, I'm never going to find my way out of it, and I'm never going to fall into it again. That is a recurring cycle. But it's, if you feed into that and don't challenge it on a frequent basis and give your chance to have a completely different experience even the very next day, that to me is the skill set over time that you learn to become better at. And with a combination of, pharmaceuticals and medications and different types of therapies, exercise, a lot of things that allow your body and your mind to get out of that mode, you then start to string together lower peaks and valleys and less frequency, and you become more and more free over time of that becoming a impairment on your level of contentment. That to
Oh,
me
I
is
just love that.
what I counsel my kids on. And again, what I'm trying to do is, like, I suffered for 20, 2 or 3 decades all told. I'm in a different place over the last 5 years, and I feel like I'm on a trajectory to end my life, however long it goes, saying I enjoyed that experience. I'm content, and that's wanting to live for as long as you can, because every day is a new opportunity to have a good experience, to cry if you have to cry, to have all the emotions, to have disappointments and successes, and love and acceptance with your family and friends and people that you associate with. That's what life is all about. It's not getting to a destination of, hey, I've made it, now I'm happy. It's enjoying the challenge of every day and saying, look, on a scale of 1 to 10 of contentment, I spend my time at a 9 or 10. And I spent 2 or 3 decades of my life at a 3 or a 4.
Mark, did you lose opportunities in business? Did you think you were going to lose opportunities when you started to talk about it and show people, or take time out for work? I feared myself coming out of the bipolar closet that it would hurt my career. No one would want me in their company, especially as an executive. You're dealing at the highest level in the nation. Did you fear that? What happened? Did more opportunities open up? Did they close? What happened?
I didn't have any reservations or fears about becoming transparent with my experience when I was asked by our chairman to share, some stories. Once I made him aware, on a friend-to-friend level of some of the challenges. I think in part because I had already established myself, in my profession. I already, was viewed by people that I cared about and respected at a certain level, that it was almost like I didn't have fear of repercussions or losing opportunities, or, you never want to be the guy that craters when you're most needed. So to me, rather than coming out, so to speak, and sharing my experience, the more excruciating decision points in my life were the 2 times that I had to call time out.
Yeah.
Those were painful decisions to, figure out, do I really need to? Am I okay? Am I that sick? I don't want to, what does it mean in terms of my progress? Am I going to make partner in this profession? Those types of decisions were much more painstaking for me than any fear of repercussions and in fact, I've got nothing but, in the aftermath of that, in the short aftermath, appreciation for sharing that. There's a lot of silent sufferers. This is, pervasive. And as we get into social media and you hear about the times of today, it's even more so. It seems like every person, almost, some high percentage, is dealing with some level of mindset problems, if not mental illness, that is affecting their life and their ability to improve and perform at their best.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for being patient as we learn how to podcast. I know you have some suggestions for me, and others do too. And we're learning. The purpose of this podcast is to ignite conversation with people that have performed at the highest level and are open and sharing. There is I worked in the COVID pandemic at a high level with testing, getting people around the world, traveling and stuff. And it was an amazing part of my career. But COVID caused, in the workplace, it went from like 40 or 50% that identified with anxiety up to 70% reported now. And diagnoses have almost doubled if you look at the research. And it's exactly what you're saying. Everybody is suffering at some point, has or is, with anxiety, with depression, with other illnesses. And that's the reason for this podcast. I was going to say what's next for Mark, but you've taught me something very valuable and reminded me of something. I don't really care what's next. Are you enjoying today? Are you here and now today? And that's I was going to say, what's Mark's why? Why do you, how do you define yourself? And what I've heard very clearly today is enjoy the journey and be here and now. I unfortunately had to push my wife through the airport in a chair over the weekend due to her MS complications, and she was tired. The Salt Lake Airport's terrible getting back and forth from the entrance to your gate, and I thought to myself, I need to enjoy every second. Time is ticking, life is ticking. How dare I push all these high and mighty goals and delusions on myself and my family? How can I be here and now? And that you've accomplished so much, and the more than chat GPT, whatever it's called, you have wisdom and you have applied knowledge, you have research, right? You've distilled all this in so beautifully today. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience, beyond enjoy the journey and be content?
If you guys will indulge me, I'll share with you.
Please.
Oh yeah.
I'll share with you some thoughts that I put together in writing in a couple of different contexts, but it manifests in counseling a colleague that was struggling with depression that came out of my openness a few years ago within my firm. And I'll just try to read it eloquently here and quickly.
Take your time.
In my experience, finding and keeping balance and wellness is an evolving thing that is never quite fixed or cured, even though we all search for that panacea, but requires attention and adjustment along the way. Although one does become more skilled over time at smoothing out the magnitude of the highs and lows. Giving priority to such balance and wellness is critical in my view, as mindset, or whatever you want to call being well, even in the face of inevitable challenges, is everything. I'll share with you below my recent text to my siblings in response to my pops sending to us Amanda Gorman's poetry reading at the Biden inauguration. So this is a couple years old, but I don't know if you remember Amanda Gordon, African-American young woman who was very eloquent in her poetry. And I picked out, my dad sent that to me and my siblings. He'll often read something and share it with our siblings and invite kind of a reaction and a text chain. I focused on a couple of portions of that poem. A nation that isn't broken, just unfinished. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. My reaction to those was, I've learned through my own experience and struggles that mindset is everything and dictates either for good or bad one's perception of her own existence, her worth and potential, her relationship with, reactions to, and interpretations of myriad uncontrollable life-intercepting unknowns, and whether one is predominantly progressing with inspiration, passion, and zeal, or merely enduring, biding, if not wasting time, stagnating, hardening, resigning, conceding, and dying. I've experienced extended phases of the latter and elusive episodes of the former, but know most assuredly that an indomitably persistent and patient pursuit of a contented and courageous rather than fearless mind, one that empowers and propels, leaving no breath for the self-saboteur, is worthy of prioritization if we are to maximize the joy that life can afford, as well as the influence for good that still waits, no matter the stage or station of life at present, no matter the failures and foibles precedent. Although conceptually relevant to a nation or the world, the notion of not being broken but merely unfinished is a mindset that, if adopted and believed first as individuals, can powerfully emanate concentrically to ever-increasing spheres of influence and change. The truth that there always is and will be light can then be more readily shine in plain view, undistorted from impaired perception, and invoke the latent bravery resident in us all to both see it and be it, for unimaginable individual and collective betterment. Mrs. Gorman's words resonated with me in these respects. I share that because that is a distillation of mindset being the most important thing for all of us. It affects everything. And learning to have a mindset that is self-supporting rather than self-debilitating, and whether that's part of controlling your mind with whatever ailments and challenges you face. My advice to everyone is every individual on this planet owes it to themselves and is worthy to prioritize being well. And if you're not well, don't concede to being in that state of being, because there is a solution. I guarantee to my siblings, and I guarantee to my nieces and nephews that I talk through that are struggling, I guarantee to them that this is not a state of being that is their destiny in life. They just have to believe it and fight through it and continue to challenge it until they are if not completely free, they are in a state of contentment most of the time. I believe that wholeheartedly based on my own experience and my objective in being vocal on my experience. It's just one person's experience like you. I'm not a professional in any of this, but I do have some life experience.
Yes.
My goal is to, if there's anybody that I can share it with, to make their suffering shorter. I'm more than willing.
And I was going to ask that. Please go beyond helping your family and write the book. You need to. You probably don't have time, but make time, please. Your mind and how articulate you are, and the research and the wisdom and everything you've gone through and the level you've gotten at. Please write a book. Write many books. You guys can see why I was excited to have him on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
So, you should become an artist. Just quit being an attorney. Come paint. You'd love it.
Well, I tell people, I say, Dad, like you went and like established this standard of higher education. I wish I just wasn't educated and I could just be a mailman or a carpenter.
Can you talk to?
I know I could finish my route every day, and I just can't find that route that pays.
You should see the what's if you look up jobs for bipolar people, it's the opposite of what I've chose to do as well. It's pretty funny. Talk a little bit before we end. Talk about your family and all the education, and just it is amazing the level of education everybody's gotten. They're gonna have to be patient as I stumbled through this whole thing with you, and but talk about that a little bit, because it's truly amazing.
That, I would say that as Sabe mentioned, the Anderson family, we lived in a townhouse complex on the same cul-de-sac. Myself and my older brother were 6 or 7 years older than Sabe, only 3 or 4 years older than his older brother Justin. I have a sister who is Justin's age. I've got a younger brother who is Sabe's age, and they went through high school together. I couldn't say what nice people Darcy, his dad, and Julie, his mom, were, and the relationship that we had as families growing up with, the nexus to the kids. When I heard of your mom's passing a handful of years ago, it was shocking. It was a sadness that and a loss that we probably didn't express adequately to you, but it was the loss of quite a fantastic woman.
Thank you.
What was the original?
Talk about that level of education
and props, Sabe, to you and your family and where you come from and the challenges that you've overcome. Yeah. My dad loves to brag on his kids. And he set a standard where, he'll either my brothers and I will be on a golf course with him, and he'll tell us, what our credentials are, or we'll get together with my sister. And to a person, I went to Stanford Law and Business School. My brother got a master's from Harvard. My sister got a PhD from University of Chicago. My younger brother got an MBA from Columbia. So you go around the horn, and he loves to brag on the fact that he's got a group of kids that has followed his lead and achieved. I'm just a white collar guy in a blue collar, or a blue collar guy in a white collar job and world. I don't like to,
I'm gonna call BS on that.
I'm only saying that because you asked me the question, and because my dad, I don't want to brag on myself or brag on anybody.
I'll brag. That's all I'm doing is bragging on you guys. I'm so excited to put this out and get this released. Please write your book. Please share more. The way you can distill and speak about it's truly inspiring and amazing. And again, it's the reason for this podcast. I told everybody we got to show up on time. We got to be prepared for this one. And so we were, and I think we've delivered. So thank you again. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience?
No, just thank you. And for those that are suffering from any of this, get help and overcome it. It's possible. Believe that the next day can be completely different from what you're feeling today, and give yourself a chance day after day to be better each day. Great to meet Clarissa, you and Nash and Sabe. Thanks for the invite, and would love to continue the dialogue and the relationship as you guys continue to do your thing.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. Till next time.